Welcome, my friends, back to the fog. Wandering through this realm, the only sensations one can never experience or comprehend are those of agony, death, and despair. There is no hope and no salvation, only an endless cycle of madness and terror. And it can be hard to have faith in such conditions. It can be hard to move forward when, with every step through this horrid place, you feel the weight of nightmares and terrors the mind cannot begin to rationalize. And yet some have incredible faith that remains unshakable. But it is not a survivor who is maintaining faith in a higher power. It is a killer. A killer simply known as the Plague. Aedoris was not wanted by anyone. The youngest of a family of 7, she was abandoned at 5 years old on the steps of the Temple of Purgation, the city of Babylon. She feels alone and dejected, unloved and unwanted. But it is then that she meets the high priest, Habon. Habon takes her in and restores her faith and heart. He tells her that she is wanted. The gods have plans for her. She has come to the temple because it was their wish that she do so, and from there he begins to train her to become a priestess of Babylon. Aedoris grows up pious and strong. Her faith is fierce, and she climbs fast through the ranks of the priestesses and the maiden guard. In good times and in hard times she does not waver, and in large part it is because of her faith in the gods and her devotion to Habon. Gradually, though, times do change. A plague begins to descend upon Babylon, and the people are afraid. The scriptures are clear on this point. A cleansing must be done. By offering up human flesh and blood, the gods will be appeased and cleanse their land. Sacrifices are offered, rituals are underwent, and the wails of those unlucky few meant to offer themselves to the gods are heard throughout the temple. But Habon has started to change. His face is sunken, and his passion gone. Aedoris begins to fear for her mentor and friend. What has happened to him? One day, while playing a game with him, he reveals the truth to her. That he has lost faith in the gods. He has lost faith in their power to clean and protect. He will not allow mindless and blind zealotry to destroy Aedoris' life. But Aedoris is beside herself. Her mentor, the man who showed her the love of the gods, has turned his back on them. It was blasphemy. It was evil. And she told him as much. But Habon replied that she should go to the temple and pray to the gods on this matter, and let their silence be the answer. Aedoris did as she was instructed, and she prayed fervently, patiently, desperately. But she heard nothing. Doubt crept into her heart and mind, and she began to get up to find her mentor. But then she heard it. A whisper, soft but there. It spoke to her, telling her that her faith would be rewarded, that she was wanted, and that blood was required. Blood would always be required. Aedoris spent the next evening lashing at herself furiously for her doubt and her thoughts of blasphemy. But it wasn't enough. The gods needed more devotion. She had to contend with Habon. He was captured, tortured, and finally punished as a living sacrifice for his blasphemy.
Adanika dingia.
Despite all she did, and all the work poured into the temple, the plague did not stop spreading. Eventually it claimed even her. Abscesses and sores grew all over her neck and body. She coughed blood and bile. Her foot turned black and swollen, making it hard to walk. She vomited regularly. Her flesh carried the reek of disease and sick. Despite it all, her devotion to the whispers, to that voice, had been undiminished. What else could it be but the God speaking to her? Her only course now was to take her believing followers and leave the city. So she wore a veil to hide her face and led the sick, like herself, away from the city until they could walk no further. Left to rot and die in a cave beyond Babylon's protection, even as the devoted died and wasted away around her, Aderus prayed. Aderus prayed, wept, pleaded with the voice to speak with her again. But silence was her answer, for the entity had already gotten what he wanted. No one ever discovered the remains of Aderus, for no one knows that a dark power had claimed her. Now Aderus walks the fog, seeking to understand, seeking the voice of her gods, seeking answers through blood. Her only guide is the voice, that voice that she heard so long ago. Even as her body decays and her bile rolled from her lips, she would speak for the gods evermore. For that is the duty of the High Priestess of Babylon. That is the duty of the Plague Made Manifest. Now, I adore this lore, okay? From her bio to her tome, the Plague's lore is absolutely top tier, okay? Tragic but not corny, hunts for betrayal and content mixed in with devotion and desperation. Look, as a spiritual man myself, I understand the difficulty of maintaining faith through difficult times. And since Aderus was a child when she was abandoned at the temple, she obviously saw Habon and the gods as her only means of comfort and support. I also like how starkly different Habon and Aderus' reaction to disaster were. When the plague came, Habon's faith shattered in the face of sacrifice and loss. Meanwhile, Aderus only became more devoted, which is tragic in the extreme. It's heartbreaking seeing how much Habon wants to save this girl from this horrid life, and how she is manipulated into falling deeper into it thanks to the entity. Like, for example, think about it. Imagine how things might have been different had the entity not whispered to her. It's fascinating how she saw Habon as a father figure, but then turned to the entity as her father figure instead, and we watch as she demonstrates her devotion through this horrid sacrifice upon the man who only wanted to save her. In fact, I have to wonder, the entity called out to her, but he really didn't have to, but he did anyway. And you gotta wonder, why didn't he talk to her later? Why didn't he continue to speak to her like when she was walking away? Or why did he allow it's almost like he played a cruel joke on her, you know? It's like she's desperate for the gods to bring her cleansing. So the entity plays the role of the gods to speak to her, to make her do outlandish things, but she still has to suffer and watch other people suffer. It's like, oh yeah, I'm your god, and you're gonna do terrible things for me, but I'm still gonna get to watch you suffer as a result, and then I'm gonna claim you later, and you're gonna have to kill people for me, and oh man, it's great. It's so tragic, it's so dark, because what we have here, Aderus is not an evil person. That's what I find so tragic about it. She's doing all this. She did all that she did because she thought it was going to save people. She thought she was hearing the God, she was hearing the devil, you know, that's what it came down to, and she was manipulated, misused, and abused. It is tragic what happened to her, but I absolutely love the lore. It is very, very well done, and unlike last time with Jane Romero, the tome only made it even better. The tome only added to it. I really, really love the tome. But okay, I know you guys don't really care so much about the lore. You want to hear about the power. Okay, I love her power. The Plague's power is called Vile Purge. Okay. The Plague has earned the nickname Vommy Mommy because of her unique power. The Plague has the power to projectile vomit at survivors or the environmental objects. By holding down the power button, you charge up the power. The longer you charge it up, the longer the stream of vomit is. Hitting a survivor directly with the vomit will infect them. Hitting an object like a vault window, a generator, a pallet, a chest, or a locker will infect the object for 40 seconds. If a healthy survivor interacts with an infected object or survivor, they will become infected too, gradually spreading the infection like a disease. Now, when a survivor becomes infected, they gain a sickness meter, which increases gradually with time and when they are hit by Vile Purge again. When the meter is filled, the survivor will enter the injured state and be afflicted with the broken status effect, coughing and vomiting constantly as they go about the trial, infecting objects and other survivors that they interact with. This power allows the plague to constantly apply pressure on survivors and put them in states where they can be more easily downed. But there's another aspect of the power too. Throughout the trial are various pools of devotion, water fountain pools that can heal an infected survivor back to full health and remove the infection. However, cleansing yourself at a pool will corrupt that pool, making the water red, and it cannot be used again by a survivor to cleanse themselves. But it can be used by the plague. If a pool of devotion is corrupted, the plague can interact with it to absorb the corruption, turning her vile purge into corruption purge for 60 seconds. Doing so will restore the pool of devotion so it can be used again, but it will change the nature of Plague's vomit. While Corruption Purge is active, the Plague's vomit turns red and it no longer applies infection. Instead, it damages survivors and can put them in the injured state or down them. The best strategy with this power depends on what the survivors choose to do to counter you. See, most survivors who are unexperienced with the plague will do everything they can to remove infection so it doesn't counter their ability to do gens or help each other. This means they will constantly search for pools of devotion to heal themselves. In this case, it's best to not use Corruption Purge that often. Instead, let them keep corrupting pools of devotion, constantly infecting them again and again to maintain pressure. And eventually, it'll be harder for the survivors to find pools to cleanse themselves, and thus they will be unable to escape the infection and they will remain broken throughout the trial, giving you the advantage. Then you can use the Corruption Purge and replenish it as often as you like from all the pools near the end of the trial when you're no longer as pressured and you can take your time downing your prey. However, some survivors are veterans who know about this strategy and will simply accept the broken and infected status effects. They know better than to give you an extra weapon with the Corruption Purge, so they trust their ability to evade and hide from you despite their broken nature. It's a gamble they choose, but smart survivors can indeed evade the plague if infected. To counter this, your best bet is to consistently infect everything as often as possible. Be sure to infect survivors you hook if they aren't already, and infect generators early so that survivors who gen rush will spread the infection faster. Get them in the broken status effect as fast as possible so you can start hunting them down faster. It's your best bet. The sooner you can get them all infected, the sooner they have to make that gamble. Do they try to go and cleanse themselves in a corruption pool and potentially give you a new weapon? Or do they just stick with the broken status effect and deny you that weapon but disadvantage themselves? That's the way the Plague plays, and I love it. It's such a good way to play her. I really like playing the Plague. She's one of my favorites. Now, aside from her power, of course, is her perks, and I actually like the Plague's perks too. The Plague's perks are Corrupt Intervention, Infectious Fright, and Dark Devotion. Corrupt Intervention is probably her best perk and one I see lots of killers run. At the start of the trial, 3 generators in the trial that are farthest from you will be blocked by the entity for 2 minutes. If you hook a survivor before the 2 minutes are up, the perk will immediately deactivate. Now, I like this perk because it's perfect for the Plague as it limits where survivors can begin making repairs, allowing you to narrow your search for them. However, there are some survivors smart enough to be patient and wait near a block generator until it's available, knowing you're less likely to search there. But even so, if they can't do anything for that 2 minutes to that generator, I say let them wait. I'll get them later. The next perk is Infectious Fright. It's pretty useful to keep track of close by survivors. When a survivor is put into the dying state, all survivors within your terror radius will scream and reveal their location for 6 seconds. I like this one as it gives me an update as to where survivors are when I'm getting ready to hook, so I know if I'm about to get flashlighted. It also tells me where to start chasing my next prey. And finally, Dark Devotion. It's a little confusing at first, but I'll explain as best I can. You become obsessed with one survivor throughout the trial. When you injure this obsession by any means, Dark Devotion activates. Your terror radius transfers to the obsession for 30 seconds, and its radius changes to 32 meters. And you also gain the undetectable status effect for the same duration. So essentially what you're doing is you're giving this obsession your terror radius. Now, you might wonder, what's the use of that? Many things. Firstly, it gives you undetectability for 30 seconds, letting you move around without a terror radius to hinder you briefly. But also, if you run any perks that cause disabling effects to survivors in your terror radius, for the next 30 seconds, that obsession survivor will carry those disabling perks around with them because they have your terror radius radiating off them, harming anyone that would try to come over to try to heal them or any people working on generators that they interact with. So essentially what's happening is you have now made them a red herring, as it were. Well, let's say that someone's working on a generator and they suddenly hear the terror radius, they want to run away to get away because, oh no, the plague is coming, when in reality it's their survivor buddy coming and begging for help. It basically causes people to run away. It's like the coronavirus, stay 6 feet apart, someone comes running over, help me, I'm hurt, nope, stay away, stay back, I don't want to touch you, like the terror radius is near, it causes fear in them. So I really do like that. It's hard to really show, but it's very creative. It reminds me a lot of what I did with the mother concept that I came with. That killer concept I made up, the mother, it reminds me a lot of that. And I guess it's very fitting for the Vommy Mommy. At the end of the day, I absolutely love the Plague as a killer. Her lore is absolutely top tier. Her power is disgusting but very strong. Her perks are actually really good. In this season where we had a survivor that I thought was decent but kind of failed halfway through, it's nice to have a killer who absolutely dominated. I absolutely love the Plague. She's an excellent killer, and if you haven't tried her out, I highly recommend her. Absolutely top tier. But guys, as we know, now that we've done a killer, it's time for us to do a survivor, and the next survivor that we have to talk about is a licensed survivor, but he's not only cool, he's groovy. Anyway, guys, we'll talk more about that next time in The Fog. Take care.
My agent told me once I completed my contractual obligations that you had a little something for me. This isn't tequila, but what the fuck?